All right. So what we're going to talk about today is just sort of some of the systems and processes that I've used to help me manage some listings when things, are probably a more normal market. Obviously, for the last couple of years, for a lot of people, you've gotten used to, putting up a property and having a lot of attention and kind of holding the power because it's been a gross seller's market. And it still is in most places right now, but I do think that the tides are going to change. I'm curious, post in the chat if you are noticing some signs that things are shifting in your market. Post it in the chat. I'd love to hear. We have people from probably 4 different countries on this Zoom call right now. So pretty exciting, but I'd love to hear if you guys are seeing anything happening, any shifts, any signs that things are changing in your market areas. I think interest rates are going up. Canada, in the United States, especially right now, I think we've seen that. So we're starting to see that more aggressive rate hikes are coming to kind of combat inflation. And I do think at some point that may have some cooling effect on the market. I'm certainly not saying that we're going to see a crash per se, but I do think that we will see a cooling off in the market just because certain people aren't going to be able to afford listings. So here's something that I'm going to suggest for you guys when you are having your listing conversations, and let's say you've got the listing with the client. Some of the things that I think are really important are going to be how you set up potential conversation around a price adjustment. And there's key strategic language there. A price adjustment is a lot different than a price reduction. Keep that in mind, okay? A price adjustment needs to be done in a timely fashion. And if it's done in a timely fashion, it will not impact the perception of value on your listing the same way that a price reduction will. So let me give you guys a perfect example of a conversation that you should have with your sellers right now when you're basically getting the listing signed. So Joe, I'm ready. You mind playing the client for me?
Yeah, for sure, man.
Okay, cool. So basically, Mr. Seller, so Joe, there's 3 scenarios that are going to play out once we launch your listing. Okay, in the first 10 days, here are the 3 scenarios that are going to play out. Scenario number 1, which is the ideal scenario that we're going for, is that we will see at least an offer or multiple offers, right? With all the marketing, everything that we're doing with the strategy of showings and everything else, that is the best case scenario. Your home's value, its perception of value, is absolutely going to be at its absolute peak right in that first 10 days, okay? Scenario number 2 that could play out, Joe, is say we have 10 or more showings in that first 10 days and we don't get any offers, okay? That could be a clear indication from the market that we may have missed the mark on price, okay? So what we're going to do is we are going to have, if we don't get any offers, we will have another meeting at the 10-day mark where we can sit down as a team and reevaluate how things are going. Scenario number 3, which is the one we want to avoid at all cost, is we really don't get a lot of action in the first 10 days. And that will be a very clear signal and sign from the market that we have missed the mark on price. Okay. So very important that, again, we have a conversation at the 10-day mark. Now, for anybody that's listening right now, if you have those sellers that are maybe adamant that they want to test a higher price on a listing than what you're advising them, a really good strategy is maybe you'll agree to take the listing, but set some parameters like 10 days, 2 weeks tops. So let's try your price, Joe, for 10 days or 2 weeks. But let's agree that if the market, and it's always the market, we're working together against the market, right? It's not me versus you, it's us against the market. But let's agree that if the market doesn't respond in that 10 days, that we make the adjustment in the price sooner rather than waiting too late. Because what's the number one thing that buyers ask about a listing prior to writing an offer, Joe?
How many days on market?
Right. Why do you guys think, and I'd love to hear it in the chat, why do you think buyers ask how many days a house has been on the market? Joe, I'm sure you have some thoughts, but I'd love to hear what other people think.
I do.
Why do you, like, as a buyer, why would you ask that question? Joe, question for you. Why, as a buyer, why do you ask that question?
Perception of value. It's overpriced. It's got to be overpriced.
You think if it's been on the market too long, and what would you say is like too long in your mind?
For me, I would say too long. Honestly, in this market, I'd say too long is a week.
You think a week is too long?
Yep. I think the typical buyer thinks a week is probably too long. Because all you've been hearing is low inventory, low inventory, low inventory, 200 over ask, 300 over ask. That's the narrative that people are walking away with. So when they're seeing houses sit for 1 week, automatically it's, yeah, that's crazy priced. I would say 1 week for the average consumer right now.
Okay. Now, let's assume that the market is more normal. Okay. So it's more of a normal, maybe more of a balanced market.
Okay.
So do you still think a week is too long?
I would say 2 to 3.
Thank you, buddy.
2 to 3?
Yeah, 2 to 3 in a balanced market.
Okay, cool. I'd like to hear what other people think, but I'm going to say this. Your perception of value is definitely going to be its highest in the first week to 2 weeks. There's no doubt about it. The thing that we have to manage on the listing side for our clients is the days on market, because that is the kiss of death over time, right? If a listing sits there and it's been on the market 60 days, 120 days, 200, 300 days, obviously people are going to build stories in their minds, right? Has anybody ever had a buyer build a story in their mind about like why a house has been sitting on the market too long? And usually they'll think something's wrong with it, because in their mind, they're thinking, well, if nobody's put an offer, if nobody's bought this house and it's sitting on the market, there obviously is something wrong with it, or it's priced too high. That's the perception of most buyers. Okay. So what we have to do is we have to have a plan to counteract that. So here's how you have the first conversation. You need to set up that 10-day to 14-day review in your meeting when you're launching a listing. Talk about the 3 scenarios that are going to play out. Make sure that your sellers and everybody agrees on that. Okay. So that's number 1. Number 2 is after you have that initial adjustment. So say it's the 10-day mark, and Joe and I've been giving you updates. So by the way, you should set every client up on a private client search for the competition around their home so that they can see what's pending, what's listed, what's sold. So if you're not doing that with every listing, start doing that now. The reason you want to do that is you want your clients to be able to keep an eye on what's happening in the market. Makes the conversation easier. The other thing that's important is that every time there's a showing, that you are doing your best job to follow up with the client with feedback. Now, I always set this up, Joe. Here's the thing. There's 2 ways I can send you feedback. I can filter the feedback, or I can just send you the feedback is exactly how I get it from the other agents. What would you like me to do? Because I can definitely filter the feedback for you, or do you want to hear the feedback as it comes in from other agents? It's important that you're giving your clients that consistent feedback. Ask them what they'd like to see. If it's an overly emotional, sensitive seller, then you know what? You might want to filter some of the feedback to kind of manage their feelings. But at the end of the day, have the conversation. Joe, it's really important that you know, as your advisor, and like I'm working for you right now, that I am able to communicate honestly with you on what others are saying, because it doesn't matter what you and I think of the house. It matters what a buyer thinks. And really what we can influence is we can influence the price, the condition of the home. Those are like the 2 things that we have control over. And then we can control how we market the home to give it the maximum amount of exposure. Well, you know that we are the best at what we do. We get the most exposure on our homes, and we don't cut corners. So you already know that. The second variable is we do everything in our power to help you set your home up so we can show it in the best light, right? So that's something else that, you know, we can control. And then the next thing that we have to be able to look at, how we are racking up in price in the market. So that's why you being able to see what the competition is doing is really important. Okay. Price adjustment. So if you do it early enough, it will be viewed as an adjustment, will not be viewed as a correction. So you won't be as punished because you don't have the days on market. Now, let's just say you've been on the market 10 days, 14 days, you have the conversation with the sellers, and the conversation should be pretty easy at this point because you've already set up the conversation for that price adjustment. Okay. We do the adjustment in the price. It should hopefully spur on some more activity. And if you guys have it in your MLS systems where you can do you can basically see how many more views you get at different price thresholds, make sure you use that. We have a prospecting tool in our system that we used to use, which was super helpful because I could then show my sellers how many new eyes would see the listing with an adjustment in the price. Okay. So have that conversation with your sellers. Now, let's say we do the price adjustment and we go another 2 or 3 weeks and we don't get any offers. Set your next appointment up at around the 30-day mark. Okay. Make sure again that you're communicating along the way. Send a report every week of everything that you're doing for your sellers. a big mistake that many of you are making is you're not communicating all the efforts that you're putting in. If you've been calling other agents, talking about your listing, prospecting clients, reaching out to your database, your sellers need to know that. So communicate that every single week. And we actually have an example of what like our communication to our seller looks like. Joe, I think you gave that to everybody before the Zoom call. I think it was sent out to people. Do you have a copy of it that you can pull up on the screen?
Yeah, just give me 2 seconds here. And I will dig it out.
But if you're struggling to get clients to price properties correctly, or you're having a hard time getting the adjustments in the price, it's because you're not setting it up for yourself ahead of time. You have to set it up with a logical plan and an understanding for sellers so that they can work their way to that. Obviously, we want every sale to be $1 million bajillion dollars for our sellers and make the most money. But the reality of it is the market isn't always going to agree. There may be some factors like driveways that, you know, are a factor, being on a busy road. Maybe it's the layout of the home. So there may be some challenges that we have to kind of pay attention to as we're giving advice and pricing for our clients.
Yeah, here's the weekly check-in template.
Perfect. So here's just a sample of our weekly check-in template that we can send out. So basically something that you guys can alter and put information, but every week, make sure you send a report to your clients, summarize the number of showings that we've had, how it's performing on the different social media outlets that you have, showcase that, right? Put in there your thoughts on, you know, what activities you did for the week, how things are looking. And if you feel it's time that we need to have, you know, it might be time for an adjustment in price, you can actually put that in your report. So say at the end of week 2, Joe, it's time for a price adjustment, ... And you just put that in that at the last line, and then you can follow it up with a phone call. Okay. But you're basically giving them information, keeping them educated. They can see what's happening in the market because they're on a private client search. You've already set up the conversation for the 10-day mark. You talk to them about the 3 scenarios that are potentially going to play out, which is really, really important. And then basically now it should be a lot easier. Now at the 30-day mark, if your house still hasn't sold and you don't have any offers on the property, it may be time to take it off the market for a week, maybe 2 weeks, to give the listing a breather and like kind of refresh it. Okay. Don't just take it down for a day, maybe take it down for a week, maybe 2 weeks, and then come back fresh to the market. Now what you're doing is you're limiting the amount of days that are stacking up against you. And then what happens is you're now potentially putting it in front of another pool of buyers that are now actively kind of searching. And now all of a sudden this is a hot new listing, right? The other thing that's really important too is when you do your relaunch, maybe think about like the day of the week that you relaunch it. Where's a place where you can get more eyeballs and attention? So I know historically I talk about, I like listing Tuesday through Thursday, but perhaps maybe you want to relist when you do your relist on a Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, just because then you're the only, more than likely the only new listing that hit that day. And it may just capture the attention of people. We did this strategy recently on one of our listings. We've had tons and tons of showings. We had one lowball offer, but it wasn't moving. We literally took it off the market. And then what it did is it pushed the buyers that were sitting on the fence, got them off the fence, and it got them to take action on the property. Sometimes when you take something away, that's when people realize, man, I need to take action on it. Sometimes just that 1 week cool off period, a listing that, you know, you just haven't been able to move, that 1 week cool off period, and then you come back fresh, just boom, gets it in front of the right buyer. So that's another really important strategy. You should never, ever, ever have a listing expire. You should never have a listing expire. So every time we take it off the market and we relist it, we're going to set up a new 6-month listing contract. We always do 6-month listing contracts, but I feel like it's really lazy as an agent. And I don't think it's in the best interest of your sellers to just leave a listing out there for too long, because those days on market will absolutely kill your sale. Now, some of you are wondering, okay, well, Jason, in a balanced market, you know, this makes sense, but what if you're in a buyer's market? Right? So let's say there's a lot of inventory and it's taking a lot longer for a house to sell. Well, then you might move the timeline. So maybe that first initial adjustment in the price happens at the 3-week or 30-day mark. And then maybe, you know, 60 days to 90 days is sort of like, okay, we're not getting the attention we need. We need to maybe have another adjustment along the way, or maybe it's time to take it off the market and come back fresh with a new price and just re-expose it out to the market. Okay, so you guys can kind of decide that based on the market. But setting people up. Oh, people coming in and not muting themselves. So I kind of wanted to keep this short and sweet today, but give you guys kind of some strategies and tools. Most of the objections that you're going to face are the ones that you set up for yourself because you didn't communicate and you didn't articulate a plan. If you're taking an overpriced listing, you should be able to negotiate with your client that, hey, you know what? If the market doesn't react, let's have a plan so that you don't have too many days that accumulate on you so that we can adjust the price. Very, very important, right? Joe, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think communication is key, right? I think a lot of the times we sort of put these listings up and just don't tell people what's happening on the back end, right? Something as simple as, you know, I've called 3 or 4 agents in this area asking if they have interest in the property, like just constant communication. I think that's kind of where we fall apart, because right now, like if you look even over the last few years, we're just not used to doing that. Yeah. So just constant communication. We know what's happening in the market. We know what's happening with the property, but do they?
Right. And remember, a lot of us have gotten bad habits over the last couple of years because the market's been so good. What's going to happen as the market starts transitioning is it's now going to be the most motivated sellers that are going to be setting the benchmarks on pricing. And so it's going to be more important than ever that you get clients to price their homes correctly, because if the market does start shifting in a downward trend, you're going to need to be able to get your sellers ahead of that. And so you will not be able to get away with overpricing properties, because what will happen is it'll catch up to you. So you need to develop the confidence in the systems around being able to have those conversations. So I think that will make a huge impact for people. I have one more slide that I want to show everybody. This is a really good one that you guys can add that wasn't in the package that was sent out today. But let me pull it up here. I used to go over this. Oh, here it is. It's a market range document. And it's super helpful that you can showcase to a client. Oh, sorry, Joe. Can everybody see my screen? Yeah, Joe, you can see it?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, cool. So here's the deal, right? So a lot of sellers are going to want to start high with listing a property because they always think, well, that leaves room for negotiation. As realtors, we all know that's generally a terrible idea, right? You want to list the home at the high end of its market value. And so the reason for that is obviously it's going to get more eyeballs and attention, right, at that price, which gives you more leverage as a seller. So here's the deal though. So if you look at this graph, right, number one, what that is in the legend is that that's the top end of a property's value range. And this is driven by what buyers will pay for the perceived worth of a property. Okay. Number two on this graph here is the starting list price. And you guys can see if you start high, what will happen to the amount of adjustments you need to make to finally sell the house, and the range that you're leaving on the table is going to be significant. And then number three is the market interest as it's at its peak for new listings during the first 2 to 5 weeks. So again, this is assuming a more stable, balanced market, but your perception of value may drop even faster in a seller's market. So you have to be aware of that. But if you look in the first 30 days, you're going to keep pretty good, stable perception of value, maybe the first 2 weeks. But by week 3, you start seeing a decline. But look what happens at 60 days on, if we look at the number 3 line here, it drops significantly. And so by not adjusting a price early enough, not having a plan to preserve your client's equity, what can happen is they'll end up selling for significantly less, because again, that perception of value with those days on market will really affect and hurt your clients. So this is a really cool little tool that you guys just get to know it a little bit. It's been a few years since I've personally used it, but it's still something I use with every single evaluation that I went on. And I kind of talked about the importance of having a strategy and a game plan. And again, I would never personally leave a listing out there for more than 60 days myself without taking it off, giving it a breather, and then maybe coming back to the market a week or 2 weeks later fresh. Because, you know, I know how much days on market can really affect the potential end sale price of a property. Now, there may be some properties that need to sit for a length of time because, you know what, they're just a really difficult property to sell. You guys are going to have to use your discretion on that so you can adjust the dates. but the key is having a bit of a proactive plan. So what I'd like to do now, Joe, is I'd like to actually open this up, and I'd love to hear some best practices that others maybe have with how they're managing listings or how they've historically managed listings. And Robert, you're 100% right. You could create a stigma on a property by leaving it out there for too long. Like literally those days on market, it becomes that stigmatized property. And in a lot of cases, it's not fair because the property is actually a really good property. So I'll send everybody a copy of this days on market that wants it. So that graph, I'll send the copy to everybody. But I'd love to open this up and kind of hear some of the things that people are doing to manage listings. So I'm kind of giving you guys sort of a high level, but let's hear it from some of the other people in the group, how you guys have managed listings in the past. Who wants to go
Jason,
first?
I've got one.
Yeah,
and it's in regards to, like you said, that either in a downward market or that seller who's adamant their price is right, you can actually write into the Schedule A or an addendum or whatever works in your region that you have a pre-agreed to new price at the, let's say, 2-week mark. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So then it just automatically goes into play and you don't have to rehab that conversation. It's like, look, we did everything. Here's our metrics, our data, our tracking. It didn't sell, didn't get the interest. That new improved price is now active.
I love that. Have it already agreed upon. Again,
That's it.
You guys have to demonstrate negotiation skills. If your seller says, well, I want to try this price, and you're just like, okay, and you don't have any parameters around it, well, guess what? You're going to have an overpriced listing sit there, and the damage that you're going to do to your seller long-term, because it's going to sit so much longer, is actually going to really impact their sale price. And if they're actually motivated sellers, and most sellers are, if they put a house on the market, there's a level of motivation there. You have a duty as their agent to have a plan and to have a strategy and tell them the truth. And sometimes it can make people uncomfortable having these tough conversations, but I'm telling you guys, in a normal balanced market, and there's some veterans on this call, you have to get really comfortable with difficult conversations. Deborah Lucci, I'm looking at you, right? How many, like in a different market, how many times have you had to have like a tough conversation with a seller where, you know what, reality is the market doesn't agree with the price, and how important it is to be able to have a plan that articulates that and then protect the sellers from themselves, because overpricing and keeping it out there for a long period of time is not a good strategy. And then what happens is they're like, well, if I don't sell it with you, I'll relist it with another agent. But again, that history stays with the property and it creates, like I said, that stigma.
I've got a couple of things, Jason.
Yeah, let's hear it, man.
I'm just driving, so I got my video off here, but a couple of things about like managing clients, but then also managing the listing itself. I do like the pre-planned price drops. I don't just have it in my Schedule A, but I also have these contractual change order signed in advance as well.
Yeah.
But what sometimes can happen, and keep this in mind, is you're creeping up to day 14, but you got 4 showings a day coming in. Yes, no one's written an offer, but you got a lot of activity. So sometimes, even though I'll have a price reduction signed, I'll call my client, I'll say, you know what, because we're pretty busy here, it just means that, you know, we haven't found the right buyer. You know, sometimes it's just a unique house, a unique floor plan. So I'll actually hold off on the price reduction and say, let's hold on to this. And as soon as we have 5 days where we have not received a showing request or an inquiry or something like that, right? So you can kind of adjust on the fly, right? Another thing is to keep my sellers happy. I'll provide them with realtor.ca statistics on what kind of views they're getting compared to other similar properties. My website statistics show them what kind of traffic through Facebook, you know, basically online views. That's something you can provide on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. Also, I think a lot of buyers perceive that anything that's been on the market for more than like 10 days is sold. Like, you know, it went into a bidding war, and you know, they kind of just assume that. I have these listings sitting where people are like, oh, I just assumed that was, you know, conditional offer waiting for a deposit or, you know, or whatever, right? And it's like, so I'll put right in my description, you know, still available right in the first line. You know, it's not showing desperation, but it's like just letting the consumer know right away, this thing's still up for grabs, you know? And another thing is to mix up listings that have been sitting is I'll change the wording and the description. I'll change the thumbnail photo to maybe a location shot if it's near a beach, or you know, kind of move to the kitchen picture instead of the front of the house, or I'll do a backyard shot or something just to kind of change the thumbnail for people. So it looks like, oh, is this a new one? You know, just something to mix it up, right? So that's just a few tips I've got.
Yeah, love it, man. Thanks for sharing. And I think that those stats that Jeff's talking about in your weekly email that you send out, make sure you have those stats in there. And listen, if you had no showings for the week, I want you to call your clients and I want you to tell them everything you did proactively for them that week to try and spur up business. The big problem too is like sellers are sitting there, and if they're not hearing from you regularly, they're not getting communication, they're building a story in their mind of what they think's going on. And what do you think they're thinking? Well, they're thinking you're not fucking doing anything. And that's the truth. Like if I'm a seller sitting at home, I'm not getting any action, I'm not hearing from you, and I haven't heard from you in a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, we have a big problem. Because guess what? I'm going to start talking to my family members, my friends, and I'm going to start telling them that I'm not hearing from my realtor. And guess what they're going to start telling me? They're going to start telling me about their realtor who's doing all these other things or who they worked with. And then all of a sudden they're going to start doubting hiring you. And the truth is they don't know what they don't know. So if you're not communicating and you're not expressing everything you're doing, even if there's no showings that week, you need to have at least one conversation on the phone with them, one report every single week. And I highly recommend that you're at least touching base with them every couple days, just to keep them informed of something positive going on. Very important. You have to be their biggest kind of cheerleader to keep them going. Chase, go ahead, brother.
Hey, I was going to say, when we were talking about the price reductions, I think it's very important not to do the same amount in each reduction. If you do, 2 price reductions at $10,000 each time, all that's telling the consumer is to wait for the next $10,000 price reduction because it's coming.
Sometimes your price reduction is a fart in the wind, guys, right? Meaning it's not really going to hit the impact. If you're still getting the same views as the price that you were at and you didn't really expose it to any new buyers, did you really do a lot? Maybe you got some of those showings off the fence that were thinking, humming and hawing, maybe they'll take action. But sometimes the adjustment needs to be, maybe 25,000 or whatever the number is. Like you're going to have to evaluate that. It's important when you have that meeting with your sellers, right, at the 10-day mark or 14-day mark. Even if you're not doing the adjustment in price, I'd encourage you to get face-to-face with them. And I want you guys to basically go through all your competitors in the marketplace and see how they're doing, right? Has there been any sales since we've hit the market? What sales have happened? Who are we competing with? And revisit that and stay front and center with your people. Do the same thing if you're having to have that 30-day conversation. Make sure that you're getting face-to-face with them. Very, very important, guys. Don't miss out and skip on these little steps. Very, very key, okay? Again, sometimes in a normal market or a buyer's market, you may have to manage a listing for a year, 2 years. And that may sound crazy to some of you, but like, I promise you, there's people on this call that have been through those types of markets. And you have to have a plan and continue to keep communication to keep that listing going so that you can keep the business long-term. And the best thing you can do is arm your sellers with data of what's happening in the market. If there's like key articles that you feel are of value and important for your sellers, pull out some of those excerpts and put them in your weekly report. Make sure you're changing it up and you're giving some items so that they can kind of get a grasp of what's happening out there. Anybody else want to share some best practices? There's some really good ones that have been shared. And I'm trying to, again, anticipate where things could be 3 months, 6 months from now, where many of you are going to have these things in play. And I'd start having these conversations with your sellers and setting up the plan now for sure.
I got a couple, well, actually I got a question and then I'll throw in a couple of things. Like I always try to, I do a lot of research and do a lot of comparables to try to really price correctly. If I find that, people want to be higher, I always come up with some sort of strategy to work with them and stuff like that as well. But what I'm running into, which I'll tell you is quite interesting. I know there's a couple of Victoria agents and hopefully they've seen the same thing. I just like everybody's pricing everything way undervalued, right? So then you have now like told all the buyers that you got to be prepared because those numbers are bullshit. So think about 150K over what you see. You know, if it's $1 million, it's going to go for 1.2, right? So now you go and price a property properly, right? Well, then you don't get the showings because everyone's like, oh shit, well, they're expecting they're going to get 1.5, right, for a 1.2 property, right? Even though it was a 1.2 property all along. But it's like now the mentality of the buyer is that, you know, I can't even compete. I'm not going in on that, blah, 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 blah. You know, and I think that's becoming an issue, you know what I mean? Because I've seen it where I've tried to be like, you know, okay, you guys, like it's better to price, you know, like let's just maybe knock 100, you know, like 50K, you know, still be in that range, but not like this. And then all of a sudden you get like, oh, we got 500,000 over list price because we listed at 900,000 in Oak Bay. You know what I mean? And you're like, oh, awesome. So I'm having a couple issues with some of the listings that we've had, but I mean, again, then you get the, you price it right and you think, you know, okay, we're getting really close to that. And then you get 110K over because you got that Hail Mary from the person that's super desperate, right? So it's a really tough time on listings and putting a value, like an actual market value. So a lot of the times when I'm talking to people, I'm like, look at, you know what, I think we should still be looking at our comparables. We can't just base it on the last one that sold for, you know, 100,000 or 200, 300, 400,000, because we don't know what the other offers look like. But, you know, if we price it, you know, the buyers are going to dictate the market, you know. So if we come in at the right price, you know, we got to, hopefully we get, you know, even a few people that are willing to kind of come in and around that or whatever, but the buyers are going to always dictate the price.
100%. It's a tricky one, man. Lane, I can't say that like a lot of people haven't been struggling with figuring that one out because yeah, I mean, and then there's the flip side. Say you do aggressively price the home well below market value. And let's just say it doesn't quite work out the way that your seller's expectations. Well, I'm hearing stories out there of people now saying, well, my clients rejected all offers and aren't even going to take them. And there's like offers that are 200,000 over asking price. Well, clearly there's an agent there that didn't set expectations up with the client, because you have to say, like, look, worst case scenario, if you got X, would you be willing to sell the house if that's where the market was at? And if the conversation, well, no, we never sell at that, we have to sell at X. Well, you know, we need to do a better job of preparing our clients. And, you know, as a team, we kind of try to price at what we feel is fair market value ourselves. Just because I feel like that's kind of more realistic in a normal market. There are times where we, you know, if we have like the really hot one, then we'll price it slightly below market value and then hold tight, and we have like offer strategies. Of course we do that, but it's tricky, man. It's not as easy as it once was. I mean, even veterans are having a hard time figuring out pricing sometimes. So that says a lot about, you know, how crazy the market shifted. So
hey, Jason, another thing too is I like to reach out to the listing agents who have recently sold the properties I'm using as comparables, because you know, you see a property listed for 1.6, it sells for 2.2 million. And you call the listing agent, he's like, yeah, we had 8 offers. 7 of them were like 1.6. And then the one was the one off that was 2.2. So it's like your seller's expecting that 2.2 when 95% of the offers actually came in at 1.6, you know? So I really like talking to other agents that have listed those comps.
yeah, good. Very good. Know your inventory, know your competitors, know what they've sold for, know what happened, right? So like Jeff's saying, like talk to some of your competitors that have sold, have the story, and be prepared to be able to like really hold your ground and explain why your price is your price with anybody that's potentially bringing a buyer, right? So you guys have to know your inventory. You have to know what's going on. And this is why it's so important as well to arm your clients with that same knowledge and information. And sometimes a buyer is going to pay a stupid, crazy price because maybe they've lost 4 or 5 times and they end up paying $100,000 over market value for something, but that buyer's already gone. So that's the other conversation you may need to have with the seller. Like, look, that buyer is no longer in the marketplace. So, you know, yes, we might try to chase that price, but the market may not even be there. Have you guys ever had multiple offers on a listing and like first place was like significantly higher than second? It wasn't close. We've had that, $100,000 gap. Obviously, that one buyer really wanted the property, but the rest of the market wasn't there. So that's the kind of information, if you can get it from people, which is going to be hard because most agents won't give up that information, but if you can, it's helpful to at least know that. Another tip for you guys, when you're trying to figure out your pricing, if you do have some competitors and you need to clinch the listing, suggest to the sellers that we go out and look at our competition. Go actually look at what they're physically competing with, so that we can subjectively know what the features and benefits are between the properties that we're selling. So at least when, Kelly is bringing me an offer and trying to like posture me and tell me that, well, we've got other properties, I know exactly what those properties features and benefits are and how they compare to what we have. And then I can confidently hold my position. So know your inventory and suggest that to your sellers. I've had many listings where I was interviewing against other agents, and I suggested merely like, hey, why don't we do this? Let's go look at these homes in person so you know exactly where your listing stacks up. And that's really helped a lot. So there's another little tip. Yeah.
Hey, all great points, a lot of gold here, appreciate it. And I got our team has 2 listings coming up in a couple days. And I literally this morning reached out to the couple active listings that were kind of looking at comparables. I reached out to the listing agent to say, hey man, do you guys have any accepted offers? How's your showings going? Just kind of getting that active feedback for those listings. So that way, when I give those final price recommendations tonight, I can say, hey, this one's under contract. These 2 aren't. Look at their price points. Maybe we got to strategize a little bit more, right? So just digging a little bit deeper helps out a lot.
Love it. Yeah, absolutely. Very, very important. Anybody else have any thoughts? Any best practices? I'd love to hear from some other veterans on the call.
Hello. I'm not a veteran, but I'm still getting experience. So hopefully this will be valuable. This is good on the buy side too, as well as the both sides of it actually. Is what's happening in our market too, is we're having these crazy cash offers that are coming in, but now cash buyers are starting to get this sort of arrogance because they know that cash is king, or there's been the stipulation that cash rules. So they're like, oh yeah, well, I'm a cash buyer, so now I can demand you to fix this, this, and this. And they start trying to bully the listing agent on the price, even though they did a really high attractive price just to get their offer locked in. And so it can be helpful to let the seller know, hey, we might get some really off the wall above their offers, but that's not, price isn't the only thing that makes your offer strong. What's your inspection window look like? How much escrow are you putting in the mix? Things like that, so they can understand, oh, okay, because it's not all said and done until that inspection period is passed and we're actually moving forward to the closing table. And then of course, on the buy side, telling the listing agent, hey, we're submitting this offer, but it truly is as is. We're not going to try to bully you out of the price. This is where we're at, that kind of thing.
Good advice, man. Anybody comment in the chat? Are you seeing more bully offers accepted in your marketplace? Post in the chat.
Hey, Jason, we don't accept bully offers. We put it in our schedule that our sellers don't entertain bully offers. That's what we do, at least right now.
Now, serious question for you, Andrew. Okay. Yeah. So you have the property listed, you've done all your marketing, you've had like a handful of showings, and you definitely, like, you're not confident that you're going to have multiples on your deadline day, and you've had multiple showings. And then you get that aggressive agent that comes in with like a crazy good offer that's like unconditional and is like a price that's hard to stay with. Do you stay rigid?
Well, I always also say that it's up to the seller to decide what they want to do, right? So initially we state no bully offers, but we have a duty as a selling agent to give our clients all offers and all information. So then it's up to them. So that's how we roll with it. Usually if we're going to get bully offers, it's usually going to be like on day 1 or 2. That's what I find sometimes. And then what will happen is we just do delayed offers. So if we list it on a Thursday, we have it pre-scheduled that we get offers in Tuesday nights. And then we actually review them on Wednesday afternoon with our sellers via Zoom. That's how I structure it, right? And then from there, if our clients do get a bully offer on Friday night, what usually happens, you got like 10, 15, 20 showings over the weekend. And that's where it gets really confusing for sellers. So if we do get one, I have it in the writing saying we won't entertain it, but I always have a duty that I'll forward it to my seller unless they give me strict instructions not to look at anything at all. But if they're going to entertain that bully offer, you better contact every freaking agent out there in advance that there's a bully offer that's come in, just so that way we don't get in a lot of trouble and we're maxing out everything for our seller.
100%, 100%. I'm noticing a trend. We're seeing a lot more bully offers starting to be accepted in our marketplace. So I'm encouraging you guys, if you have buyers and you don't want to be competing, don't be afraid to put bully offers in. Just make sure that you obviously have your offers attractive, you know, because like a bully offer that's 100,000 under asking price and a low ball is just a waste of everybody's time, right? Like a seller's not going to take generally 100,000 under asking price on a listing that just hit the market. They're not there yet, right? Like there's a process before they'll probably go to that. So you have to have realistic expectations with your buyers if you're going to do it, and make sure it's an attractive one. But I would be not hesitant to try bully offers right now. We're starting to see a lot more accepted. Go ahead, Andrew.
Another thing, like I'm just trying to think of things that haven't been pointed out unless I missed it. We always want to make sure we're setting up our listings for success. So we have like a realtor package that we do up in advance prior to hitting the listing, hitting the market. You know, find out what the seller's expectation are, what are their closing dates, all the different things that you got to think about. So that way, by the time they actually write it, buyer agents write an offer, you're not getting them peppered a million questions when you could have pre-answered them at the beginning. So that way, you know, one big thing you've been coaching to, what I've been learning from is like setting up systems, having it all in place. So that way everything flows and you create greater efficiencies. So.
100%. If you're selling a property that's, we call them stratas in Canada or HOAs for you in the United States, have your bylaws available, have your minutes all available. We have something called Form Bs in Canada. I'm not sure what they are in the States for you guys, but have that information and make it easy for me to write offers on your listings, right? If you have no information, guess what? I have to put more conditions in my offers. Make my job easy on the buy side. Like that is your job as a listing agent, is to make the buyer's agents' jobs easier. Try and remove as many obstacles off the table as you can. You guys follow me, right? Like it's so sloppy sometimes, and it's frustrating when you're working with a buyer and you have a listing agent that's really slow to respond. They have no information, they're disorganized, and they don't have answers to anything. All they're doing is creating more sales resistance for their sellers, and their sellers have no idea. Be well prepared. So when you hit the market with the listing, have the freaking documents. Be prepared. Have the zoning information, have whatever it is that you need, but make it easier. So that's a really good best practice. And talk about this to your sellers. If you want to like build trust and rapport with them, talk about what your process is to make it inviting and easier for buyers and buyers agents to write offers on your property. Pre-inspections are going to be a thing coming up in the not too distant future again. So we'll talk about that another day, but the value of how to position those and how that can help overcome some of the weak agents that you may be dealing with. Sadly, there are agents out there that aren't very skilled when it comes to like a home inspection and like how to handle some of the issues that may come up with that. And as a listing agent, it's your job to figure out a way to minimize where things could fall apart. And so we'll talk about that on a whole nother day, but that's something else that's really important in the process. But today, I just wanted to get you guys sort of understanding some key things that you can put into play to manage your listings and expectations with your sellers. Have the conversation now with your sellers. Talk about the 3 scenarios that could play out. Have a plan already for the price adjustment conversation and why it's important to do that early, not too late, because if you do it too late, it will definitely be seen as a price reduction to the market, which will affect your perception of value. And for anybody that wants it, I can send that pricing thing that kind of shows, you know, what happens to a buyer's perception of value and a home's value over time. So I can send that out to people. I think that's really helpful. So love the dialogue. A lot of great ideas in here today. Really good to see everybody, and go crush it. Cheers.
Thanks, Jason.
No worries. Thank you, guys.